Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the massive diplomatic station, floating in neutral space. The metal corridors stretched endlessly in every direction, filled with the strangest collection of beings he had ever seen. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others crawled on 6 or 8 limbs, and a few seemed to float through the air without any visible means of support. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of chemicals and organic compounds that made his nose burn slightly. Dr. Lisa Bennett walked beside him, carrying a simple transport case that looked completely ordinary compared to the elaborate containers and cages being wheeled around by other delegations. She glanced nervously at Jake and whispered that maybe they should have brought something more impressive. Jake just smiled and told her to trust the plan. The Galactic Council had sent an invitation to Earth 6 months ago, requesting humanity's presence at their annual dominance display ceremony. Every species was expected to bring their world's most fearsome predator as a way of establishing their place in the galactic hierarchy. The stronger your apex predator, the more respect your species commanded in diplomatic negotiations. Ambassador Sisketh of the Veltar delegation slithered past them, his reptilian scales clicking against the metal floor. Behind him, a massive cage contained something that looked like a cross between a tiger and a dragon, with claws that could slice through steel and teeth as long as dinner knives. The creature paced restlessly, occasionally letting out roars that made the entire corridor shake. The Zephyrian Queen Mother Zek floated by next, her insectoid wings creating a low humming sound. Her delegation pushed a containment unit that seemed to bend light around its edges. Jake could barely make out the shape of something inside that appeared to phase in and out of existence. Other aliens in the hallway backed away quickly when it passed, clearly terrified of whatever lurked within. The Orthani delegation was the most impressive of all. Their crystalline forms reflected the station's lights like living prisms, and they had brought what looked like a small mountain of living crystal. The creature sang in frequencies that made the metal walls vibrate, and small cracks appeared in the floor wherever it stepped. Jake overheard one of the smaller alien species saying that Orthani crystal beasts could shatter entire buildings with their sonic screams. Ryan Clark, the mission's security chief, walked up to Jake and asked quietly if he was sure about their choice. He pointed out that every other species had brought something that could level a city block, while they had brought what most people back on Earth would consider a family pet. Jake just nodded and said that was exactly the point. Dr. Bennett checked her transport case one more time as they entered the main ceremonial chamber. The room was enormous, with a transparent dome overhead that showed the stars spinning slowly past. Hundreds of alien delegates filled tiered seating that rose up toward the ceiling, and Jake could feel thousands of eyes stalks and optical sensors focused on the human delegation. The ceremony began with each species presenting their apex predator in order of their current standing in the Galactic Council. The Veltar went first, releasing their razor stalker into a contained arena in the center of the chamber. The creature moved like liquid death, its claws leaving deep gouges in the reinforced floor as it demonstrated hunting techniques that had evolved over millions of years. The alien audience made various sounds of approval and fear. The Zephyrians followed with their Void Hunter, a creature that could apparently move through solid matter at will. It appeared and disappeared around the arena, striking holographic targets with appendages that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Jake heard Lisa muttering calculations under her breath about the physics involved, but he could tell she was genuinely impressed despite herself. The Orthani crystal beast was so dangerous that they could only show recordings of it in action on their homeworld. The footage showed the creature reducing mountains to sand with focused sonic attacks, and Jake noticed that several smaller species in the audience actually fled the chamber when the demonstration began. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Jake stood and walked to the center of the arena, with Lisa following closely behind carrying her simple transport case. The chamber fell completely silent as she set the case down and began opening the latches. Jake could practically feel the anticipation radiating from the assembled aliens as they leaned forward to see what terrible monster Earth had produced. Lisa opened the case and stepped back. Out trotted a golden retriever, tail wagging enthusiastically as it looked around at all the strange new faces. Buddy sat down next to Lisa and looked up at her, with the patient expression that golden retrievers had perfected over thousands of years of evolution alongside humans. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds. Jake could see confusion spreading across the faces of every alien in the chamber. Some of them began making what he assumed were questioning sounds in their native languages. Others seemed to be checking their translation devices to make sure they were working properly. Ambassador Sisketh was the first to speak, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's communication system. He demanded to know if this was some kind of joke or insult to the Galactic Council. The creature before them was clearly not an apex predator by any reasonable definition. It showed no signs of aggression, bore no visible weapons, and appeared to be completely harmless. Jake stepped forward and explained calmly that Buddy was indeed one of Earth's apex predators, though he admitted that the relationship between humans and their predators was somewhat unique. He suggested that perhaps the other delegations would be interested in a more detailed demonstration of what exactly made Earth's predators so special. The Zephyrian Queen Mother's wings buzzed with what Jake was learning to recognize as agitation. She stated flatly that the small furry creature could not possibly be considered a threat to anything larger than whatever small prey animals existed on Earth. She demanded proof of its predatory capabilities, or else humanity would be assigned the lowest possible status in the Galactic Council. Dr. Bennett smiled and asked if the other delegations would be willing to observe a controlled demonstration in the station's biocontainment facility. She promised that what they would see would challenge every assumption they had about the nature of predators and the relationship between species. The chamber erupted in various alien sounds that the translation system rendered as agreement. Though Jake suspected most of them were expecting to be entertained by humanity's obvious delusion about their harmless pet. The biocontainment facility was located 3 levels below the main ceremonial chamber, behind multiple layers of energy shields and reinforced barriers designed to contain the galaxy's most dangerous creatures. Jake Morrison watched as the alien delegations filed into the observation deck, their various forms of eyes and sensors focused intently on the testing arena below. Dr. Lisa Bennett stood in the center of the arena with Buddy sitting calmly beside her, completely unaware that he was about to become the center of a galactic controversy. The golden retriever was more interested in the strange smells coming from the various alien observers than in any kind of predatory display. Ambassador Sisketh coiled his serpentine body around one of the observation posts and activated his species recording devices. He had already composed what he expected to be a humorous report about the delusional humans who thought their harmless pet was somehow comparable to a razor stalker. The other Veltar delegates hissed quietly among themselves in anticipation of the entertainment to come. Queen Mother Zek positioned herself where her compound eyes could observe every angle of the arena simultaneously. Her translator was set to record every detail of what she expected to be humanity's embarrassing failure to demonstrate any kind of predatory behavior from their obviously domestic creature. The Orthani delegation created a harmonic resonance pattern that allowed them to share sensory data in real time. They were particularly interested in documenting this apparent misunderstanding of predator classification for their scientific databases. Ryan Clark activated the arena's holographic projection system and began generating virtual prey animals based on scans of creatures from various worlds represented in the Galactic Council. The first projection was a small, rabbit-like creature that hopped nervously around the arena floor. Buddy's head immediately snapped to attention, his entire body language changing in an instant. The relaxed family pet disappeared, replaced by something that moved with fluid precision and focused intensity. His ears perked forward, his muscles tensed, and his eyes locked onto the holographic prey with laser focus. The alien observers leaned forward as Buddy began to stalk the virtual rabbit. His movement was completely silent, each paw placed with careful deliberation as he used the arena's minimal cover to approach his target. When he was within range, he exploded into motion with speed that caught even Jake by surprise. The holographic rabbit disappeared in a blur of golden fur and precise timing. Buddy had covered 15 feet in less than 2 seconds, and his jaws closed exactly where the virtual creature's neck would have been. The projection system registered a perfect kill strike, and the rabbit simulation vanished. Several of the smaller alien species made sounds of surprise, but Ambassador Sisketh just snorted dismissively. Any creature could catch a small prey animal if it was fast enough. He demanded a more challenging demonstration before he would consider revising his opinion of Humanity's predatory capabilities, Dr. Bennett nodded and asked Ryan to project a pack of creatures similar to the wolf analogs from the Veltar homeworld. 6 virtual predators materialized in the arena, each one roughly the size of Buddy but equipped with fangs and claws that looked significantly more dangerous than anything the golden retriever possessed. What happened next defied every prediction the alien observers had made. Instead of fleeing or cowering, Buddy assessed the pack with calm intelligence. He moved to position himself with his back to the arena wall, eliminating the possibility of being surrounded. Then he began making tactical decisions that demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that most of the observers had assumed was impossible in a non-sentient creature. Buddy used the arena's features to separate the pack, drawing individuals away from the group and dealing with them one at a time. His attacks were precisely targeted at weak points that would disable rather than kill, and he seemed to understand concepts like feinting and misdirection that suggested advanced combat intelligence. The Zephyrian delegation began buzzing with agitation as they watched the display. Queen Mother Zek's translator was having difficulty processing what she was observing. The creature was clearly intelligent enough to plan and execute complex hunting strategies, but it showed none of the aggressive territorial behavior that characterized apex predators on her world. When the last virtual wolf disappeared, Buddy trotted back to Dr. Bennett with his tail wagging as if he had just completed a pleasant game, rather than a life-or-death struggle. He sat down beside her and looked up expectantly, clearly hoping for some kind of reward or praise. This was the moment that broke the alien's understanding completely. Dr. Bennett reached into her pocket and pulled out a small treat, which Buddy accepted gently before returning to his relaxed sitting position. The creature had just demonstrated predatory capabilities that rivaled anything in the galactic database, then immediately returned to behaving like a completely domesticated pet. Commander Lisa Torres stepped forward from the human delegation and began explaining what the aliens had just witnessed. She described the concept of selective breeding, explaining how humans had taken creatures with all the instincts and capabilities of apex predators and convinced them to channel those abilities in service of human goals rather than their own survival needs. The Orthony delegation's harmonic resonance pattern became increasingly discordant as they tried to process this information. Their translation matrices had no framework for understanding how a predator could retain all of its dangerous capabilities while voluntarily submitting to the direction of another species. Dr. Bennett called Buddy over and demonstrated basic commands that showcased the depth of their communication. She could direct his predatory instincts with simple verbal cues, causing him to track, hunt, or guard on command. More importantly, she could call him off from any of these activities instantly, overriding millions of years of evolved hunting behavior with a single word. The implications began to sink in among the more intelligent observers. Humanity had not simply survived alongside their apex predators the way most species did, through avoidance or superior technology. They had somehow convinced their predators to become partners, retaining all of their dangerous capabilities, while voluntarily placing themselves under human direction. Ambassador Sisketh's serpentine form had gone completely rigid as he watched the demonstration. His species had spent millennia learning to avoid or kill their apex predators through superior firepower. The idea that any creature could be convinced to voluntarily surrender its predatory independence was completely outside his understanding of how evolution and survival instincts worked. Dr. Bennett saved the most shocking demonstration for last. She called Buddy over and simply sat down on the arena floor, making herself completely vulnerable. Then she closed her eyes and remained motionless. Buddy immediately positioned himself between her and the observation deck, adopting a protective stance that communicated clearly that any threat to the human would have to go through him first. The arena fell completely silent as the alien observers absorbed what they had just seen. The apex predator was not just under human control, it had voluntarily chosen to place the human safety above its own survival instincts. The human quarters on the diplomatic station had been designed to accommodate species that required atmospheric conditions similar to Earth, but they still felt strange and artificial to Jake Morrison as he prepared for the next phase of their demonstration. Word had spread through the station's communication networks about the morning's events, and now delegations from species that had not even been present at the original ceremony, were requesting permission to observe humanity's impossible relationship with their predators. Marine Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez checked the environmental controls one more time before opening the transport containers that held the rest of their delegation's examples. He had been skeptical about bringing his family on a diplomatic mission, but Command had insisted that the full demonstration required showing how humans and their predators interacted in normal social situations rather than controlled testing environments. Dr. Alan Foster, the mission's animal behaviorist, was setting up recording equipment to document the aliens' reactions when Max emerged from his travel crate. The German Shepherd was significantly larger than Buddy, with a more obviously predatory build that made several of the alien observers step back instinctively. Max surveyed the room with the calm alertness of a creature that had been trained for combat situations, but was completely comfortable in social settings. The third member of their demonstration team was Luna, a domestic cat who regarded the assembled alien dignitaries with the complete indifference that cats had perfected over thousands of years of human interaction. She began grooming herself with elaborate unconcern while some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy stared at her in fascination. Ambassador Sisketh had positioned himself as far from the predators as the room's dimensions allowed, but his recording devices captured every detail of what he was observing. His species databases contained extensive information about feline analogs from dozens of worlds, and they were universally classified as solitary ambush predators, with strong territorial instincts and no capacity for social bonding outside of mating relationships. Queen Mother Zek's compound eyes tracked Luna's movements with particular interest because several of her hive worlds had been terrorized by creatures with similar hunting patterns. The idea that such a predator could coexist peacefully with other species in close quarters challenged fundamental assumptions about territorial behavior and resource competition that formed the basis of Zephyrian social organization. Dr. Foster began explaining the concept of pack bonding while Max demonstrated basic obedience commands. The German Shepherd's responses were immediate and precise, showing not just training, but genuine eagerness to please his human handler. When Carlos commanded him to guard a specific area, Max took up position with the focused intensity of a professional soldier, but his tail continued wagging to show that he was enjoying the work. The aliens were taking detailed notes and making recordings, but Jake could see that they were still struggling to understand the fundamental relationship they were observing. To them, the human commands and the predator's compliance looked like some form of advanced mind control or technological manipulation rather than voluntary cooperation. The breakthrough moment came when Carlos's 8-year-old daughter, Emma, entered the room. Having finished her lessons in the station's educational facility, she ran directly to Max without any sign of fear or caution, wrapping her arms around the 80-pound combat-trained predator in an enthusiastic hug. The alien observers recoiled in horror, several of them making sounds that their translators rendered as warnings or expressions of terror. Ambassador Sisketh actually coiled his entire body into a defensive posture, apparently expecting to witness the child being torn apart by the apex predator she had just embraced. Instead, Max's entire demeanor softened as he gently licked Emma's face while his tail wagged with obvious pleasure. The deadly precision and alertness that had characterized his behavior during the training demonstration disappeared, replaced by the patient gentleness that working dogs displayed. Around children they recognized as part of their pact, and Emma scratched behind Max's ears and told him about her day while the alien observers watched in stunned silence. She was completely relaxed and natural in her interaction with the predator, showing none of the wariness that young members of other species displayed around dangerous creatures. More importantly, Max was clearly restraining his strength and adjusting his behavior to accommodate the child's smaller size and developing motor skills. Dr. Foster explained that this was the core of humanity's relationship with their apex predators. Humans had not simply trained dangerous creatures to obey commands. They had convinced them to adopt humans as family members worthy of protection and care. The predators retained all of their lethal capabilities but chose to use them in service of the pack, rather than for their own individual survival. Luna provided the next shock when she approached Queen Mother Zek and began rubbing against the Zephyrian's lower appendages. The cat was purring, a sound that none of the aliens had heard before but which their sensors registered as indicating contentment and social bonding behavior. Zek remained perfectly still, unsure whether movement would trigger an attack, while Luna continued her display of affection toward a complete stranger from another species. Commander Lisa Torres explained that cats had originally been solitary hunters, but their relationship with humans had modified their social behavior to include pack bonding instincts that would never have developed naturally. They now sought out social interaction and physical contact with humans and, apparently with other species that humans accepted as allies. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not simply domesticated their predators. They had fundamentally altered the creature's instinctive behaviors through selective breeding and social conditioning. The predators now actively sought to form emotional bonds with humans and, by extension, with anyone humans designated as part of their extended pack. Carlos demonstrated the depth of this bonding by giving Max a series of commands that required the dog to ignore his natural instincts. He had Max remain in a sitting position while Carlos placed food directly in front of him, then walk away to the other side of the room. Max remained motionless, his eyes fixed on Carlos rather than the food, waiting for permission that might never come. The alien observers were recording frantically, trying to understand how any predator could be trained to override survival instincts so completely. On their worlds, apex predators were forces of nature that could be avoided, killed, or occasionally redirected, but never truly controlled. The idea that such creatures could voluntarily submit to external authority while retaining their full predatory capabilities was revolutionary. Dr. Bennett joined the demonstration by showing how the human-predator bond transcended simple obedience. She had Buddy demonstrate what she called protective instincts by having him respond to simulated threats against different humans in the room. Buddy could instantly distinguish between real danger and staged scenarios, and his protective responses were calibrated to match the level of threat rather than simply attacking anything that moved in an aggressive manner. The final demonstration came when Emma asked if she could show the aliens how Luna liked to play. She produced a simple string toy and began moving it around the room, while Luna stalked and pounced with obvious enjoyment. The cat was displaying all the hunting behaviors that made her species feared on dozens of worlds, but she was doing it as a form of entertainment that brought pleasure to both predator and human. Ambassador Siskith's recording devices captured every moment as he watched a creature that could have killed the human child instead, choosing to participate in activities designed solely for mutual enjoyment. His understanding of predator psychology, based on millions of years of Veltar evolution, had no framework for comprehending behavior that served no survival purpose other than strengthening social bonds. The main council chamber had been reconfigured to accommodate representatives from 47 different species, making it the largest gathering in Galactic Council history. Jake Morrison stood at the center podium, while data streams from the human demonstrations played on massive holographic displays surrounding the assembly. The air was thick with the sounds of alien languages being rapidly translated as delegates shared information about what they had witnessed. Engineer Danny Murphy had spent the past 3 days preparing a comprehensive presentation that would challenge every assumption the Galactic Council held about predator-prey relationships and species hierarchy. His holographic displays showed footage from Earth that documented humanity's relationship with creatures that the aliens recognized as variants of their own world's most dangerous predators. The first series of recordings showed humans swimming alongside creatures that resembled the Orthani's deep-sea terrors. Massive sharks moved through the water with humans who showed no fear, occasionally even making physical contact with predators that could have killed them instantly. The Orthani delegation's crystalline forms were flickering with rapid color changes that their translators indicated meant extreme agitation or confusion. Ambassador Sesketh watched footage of humans working with snake analogs that were nearly identical to the Veltar's ancestral forms before his species had evolved sentience and space travel. The humans in the recordings were handling creatures that could deliver fatal venoms, using them for what appeared to be educational and research purposes while maintaining the same relaxed interaction patterns they had demonstrated with Buddy and Max. Queen Mother Zex wings were producing a constant low-frequency hum as she processed images of humans coexisting with hive insects that shared behavioral patterns with her own species. The footage showed beekeepers working with colonies of creatures that could swarm and kill intruders, but instead were producing resources that humans harvested through cooperative rather than exploitative relationships. Dr. Susan Hayes, the mission's military strategist, stepped forward to address the implications of what the assembled delegates had witnessed. She explained that humanity's approach to apex predators was not an isolated phenomenon, but rather an example of their species' fundamental approach to interspecies relationships. Humans consistently sought to establish cooperative partnerships rather than dominance hierarchies. The chamber fell silent as Dr. Hayes continued her analysis. She pointed out that every species in the Galactic Council had achieved space travel by developing technologies that allowed them to overcome or avoid their world's apex predators. Humans had taken a completely different approach, choosing to form alliances with their predators and incorporating their capabilities into human social and military structures. Captain Morrison activated a new series of displays showing human military units working alongside their predator partners, search and rescue operations where dogs track survivors through disasters, police work where human canine teams could detect threats that technology missed, and military operations where the enhanced senses and capabilities of predator partners gave human forces significant tactical advantages. The implications began to ripple through the assembled delegates as they realized that humanity had not simply domesticated their apex predators as curiosities or pets. They had created integrated societies where predator capabilities were seamlessly combined with human intelligence and technology to achieve results that neither species could accomplish independently. Commander Torres presented data showing how this relationship had accelerated human development across multiple fields. Medical research benefited from animals that could detect diseases through scent. Engineering projects used creatures that could access environments too dangerous for humans, and even space exploration had been enhanced by animals that could survive conditions that would kill human crew. Members, the Zephyrian delegation was particularly disturbed by recordings of human children growing up alongside predators, learning to communicate and cooperate with creatures that would have been considered mortal enemies on any other world. The footage showed a level of interspecies integration that went far beyond simple training or domestication into something approaching genuine cultural fusion. Dr. Bennett presented the most unsettling data of all, showing how human-predator partnerships had continued to evolve even after humanity had developed advanced technology. Rather than replacing their animal partners with machines, humans had instead developed technologies that enhanced the natural capabilities of their predator allies, creating hybrid biological-technological systems that outperformed purely artificial alternatives. The Veltar delegation was analyzing footage of humans using enhanced canines for space station security, where the animals' natural senses had been augmented with technological implants that allowed them to detect threats across multiple sensory spectrums simultaneously. The combination of biological intuition and technological enhancement created security systems that were more effective than anything purely artificial intelligence could provide. Ambassador Sesketh finally spoke, his voice carrying a note of something that the translators rendered as either fear or awe. He demanded to know whether humanity intended to apply their bonding techniques to the other species in the Galactic Council. The question hung in the air like a physical presence as delegates throughout the chamber began to understand the full implications of what they were witnessing. Jake Morrison chose his words carefully as he explained that humans did not view other sentient species as potential subjects for domestication, but he acknowledged that humanity's natural tendency was to seek cooperative relationships wherever possible. He pointed out that the same instincts that had led humans to bond with their apex predators would likely influence their diplomatic and cultural interactions with other species. Dr. Hayes presented historical data showing how human civilizations had consistently absorbed and integrated with other human cultures through trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange rather than simple conquest. She suggested that humanity's approach to interstellar relationships would likely follow similar patterns, seeking integration and mutual benefit rather than dominance or exploitation. The chamber erupted in various alien sounds and gestures as delegates began to grasp what this meant for the future of galactic civilization. Humanity represented something completely unprecedented in the Council's experience. A species whose fundamental approach to relationships was based on cooperation and integration rather than competition and dominance. Queen Mother Zek was the first to articulate what many of the delegates were thinking. She asked whether humanity's bonding capabilities extended to species that had not evolved on their homeworld. If humans could form pack bonds with creatures from other evolutionary backgrounds, it suggested possibilities for interspecies cooperation that had never been considered in galactic history. Dr. Foster stepped forward with data that answered her question in ways that sent shockwaves through the assembly. He presented recordings from the past week showing how Buddy, Max, and Luna had already begun displaying pack bonding behaviors towards several alien delegates, particularly those who had spent extended time observing the demonstrations. The footage showed Buddy approaching Ambassador Sisketh with the same friendly overtures he displayed toward humans, apparently recognizing the Veltar as a potential pack member despite their completely different evolutionary background. Luna had been observed seeking physical contact with multiple alien species, displaying the social bonding behaviors that indicated acceptance into her extended family group. Most shocking of all, Max had begun showing protective behaviors towards some of the alien observers, particularly the smaller species that triggered his instinctive responses to protect pack members who might be vulnerable to threats. The German Shepherd was apparently applying his human-trained protective instincts to beings from other worlds, suggesting that the human-predator bond could extend across species boundaries in ways that no one had predicted. The session ended with Captain Morrison making a simple observation that left the entire assembly in stunned silence. He noted that in the 3 days since humanity had arrived at the station, their predator partners had already begun treating selected alien delegates as extended family members, worthy of protection and care. 3 months after the first contact ceremony, Jake Morrison stood in his quarters aboard the diplomatic station, reading reports that would have seemed like science fiction when the human delegation first arrived. The simple demonstration of humanity's relationship with their apex predators had triggered a cascade of changes throughout galactic civilization that no one could have predicted. On the Veltar homeworld of Scythia, Ambassador Sisketh was conducting an experiment that would have been considered impossible by his species just weeks earlier. Human trainer Mike Peterson worked patiently with a young Veltar named Kresh, teaching interaction techniques that emphasized cooperation over the dominance hierarchies that had governed Veltar society for millennia. The breakthrough had come when Kresh began displaying behaviors that older Veltar had never seen in their species. The young reptilian was following Mike around the research facility, making soft vocalization sounds that Veltar linguists were still trying to classify. Most remarkably, Kresh had begun purring, a sound that apparently existed in Veltar vocal capabilities, but had never been used in their natural social interactions. Dr. Peterson's reports described how Kresh responded to positive reinforcement and social bonding techniques with enthusiasm that contradicted everything the Veltar knew about their own psychology. The young Veltar was learning to work cooperatively on tasks that would normally trigger territorial competition responses, and seemed to derive genuine pleasure from successful collaboration with humans. Similar developments were occurring throughout Zephyrian space, where Queen Mother Zek had authorized a cultural exchange program that was producing results that challenged fundamental assumptions about hive mind societies. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had established communication protocols with individual Zephyrians that bypassed their species' usual hive consciousness pathways, allowing for one-on-one interactions that had never existed in their civilization. The most startling discovery was that individual Zephyrians, when separated from hive mind influences, displayed curiosity and creativity that their species had assumed was impossible outside of collective consciousness. Several Zephyrian scouts had begun following Dr. Walsh around in patterns that resembled the pack bonding behaviors observed in human-predator relationships, apparently finding individual identity through association with humans. Back on the diplomatic station, the changes were even more dramatic. Captain Morrison's daily logs documented a transformation in interspecies relationships that was affecting every aspect of galactic diplomacy. Species that had maintained formal hostile relationships for centuries were beginning to explore cooperative possibilities. Inspired by humanity's integration model, the Orthani delegation had been particularly affected by their observations of human-predator bonding. Their crystalline physiology had initially made them skeptical that such relationships could extend to their species. But Commander Torres had developed interaction protocols that seemed to be producing positive results. Several Orthani had begun harmonizing with human musical expressions, creating complex resonance patterns that both species found aesthetically pleasing. Emma Rodriguez had become an unofficial ambassador for human-alien relations, spending her free time playing games with young aliens who were visiting the station with their delegations. Her natural childhood ability to form friendships transcended species boundaries in ways that formal diplomatic protocols could never achieve. Jake often found her teaching Earth games to alien children while their parents watched in amazement at interactions that would have been considered impossible. Just months earlier, the most significant changes were occurring in the station's social areas, where informal interactions between species were beginning to replace the rigid hierarchical structures that had previously governed interspecies relationships. Buddy had become something of a celebrity, with alien delegates regularly seeking him out for interactions that seemed to provide them with emotional experiences they had never encountered in their own cultures. Luna's influence was more subtle but equally profound. The cat had appointed herself as the station's unofficial greeter, approaching new arrivals with the confident friendliness that cats displayed toward humans they had decided to adopt. Several alien species had reported that their first positive interaction with any Earth creature had been with Luna, who seemed completely unconcerned with the vast differences in physiology and psychology between species. Max had become integrated into the station's security operations, working alongside alien security forces in ways that demonstrated how human-trained predators could enhance rather than compete with existing systems. His ability to detect threats across multiple sensory spectrums had prevented several potential conflicts between visiting delegations, and alien security chiefs were beginning to request human advisors to help develop similar cooperative programs. Dr. Bennett's research had expanded into a full xenological study of how human bonding techniques could be adapted for different species. Her preliminary findings suggested that most sentient species had latent capacities for interspecies bonding that had never been developed because they lacked the social frameworks that humans had created through their relationships with apex predators. The galactic communication networks were carrying reports of similar developments from dozens of worlds as species began experimenting with cooperation-based rather than dominance-based social structures. Trade relationships were being restructured around mutual benefit rather than competitive advantage, and several minor territorial disputes had been resolved through mediation techniques adapted from human conflict resolution methods. Perhaps most significantly, the Galactic Council had received over 200 formal requests for human cultural advisors from species who wanted to explore how cooperative relationship models might be implemented in their own societies. Jake found himself coordinating deployment of human teams throughout the galaxy, a development that would have been unthinkable when their mission began. The changes went beyond politics and economics into areas that touched the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Art forms were emerging that combined human creative techniques with alien perspectives, producing cultural expressions that neither species could have created independently. Scientific research was being revolutionized by collaborative approaches that leveraged the different cognitive strengths of various species working together rather than in competition. Jake's final log entry for the mission captured the transformation that had occurred since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. He noted that what had begun as a simple diplomatic ceremony had evolved into something approaching a galactic renaissance, with cooperation replacing competition as the dominant model for interspecies relationships throughout known space. As he finished his report, Jake looked out through the station's observation deck at ships from dozens of worlds docked at the facility. Many of them carried mixed crews representing multiple species, something that would have been impossible under the old dominance hierarchy system. The changes that had started with a golden retriever's tail wagging in a ceremonial arena were spreading throughout the galaxy at speeds that suggested they addressed fundamental needs that had been suppressed under the previous system. Buddy wandered over and settled down beside Jake's chair, completely unaware that his simple presence had helped trigger a transformation in galactic civilization. Outside the observation windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, but now they shone on a galaxy where cooperation had begun to replace conquest as the driving force of interstellar relations.